Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For those who are here for the first time, welcome. We are Sona, the next generation workforce management solution for hospitality operators. We do consumer grade design powered by modern next generation AI. We work with customers like the Pig Hotels, Glen Eagles, Paul's Bakeries, Insomnia, LGH, and many more. Thank you for joining our webinar. And if, again, this is the first time you're here, just wanted to tell everyone that the chat function is available. So please leave us some comments, say hello to our experts today. And the Sona team is going to be present in the chat as well. So if you have any kind of questions, just let us know. The webinar is going to be recorded, so we'll be sending the recording afterwards to everyone who registered. And finally, the boring bit, I have to say this, all views expressed today are, and the presentation only reflect the speaker's views and not the wider views of their organization. So without further ado, Paul, who is our lovely host, is going to take over now.
Good morning. Thank you, Christina. Or actually, I should say good afternoon now that we're in to midday. Lovely to have you all with us today, and lovely to have Steve joining us. My name's Paul Watson. I'm the VP of Hospitality at Sona. I've spent the last almost 2 decades now working for a SaaS product for the hospitality sector, helping many brands gain success from their workforce management solutions. Before I got into hospitality, I was actually a learning development consultant and specialized in communications and culture and HR. So it's always been something that's very close to my heart, to sort of understand, how do you drive great performance in an organization? How do you measure that success, etc.? And how do you celebrate those brilliant individuals that are helping to deliver your brand standards? Unfortunately, Craig can't attend today. Personal reasons beyond his control. He sends his apologies, but he will be joining us for a future webinar. So it's just myself and Steve I'm going to allow to introduce himself.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for your time today. My name's Steve Rockey, People Director for the Pig Hotels. We are a hotel group of 9 hotels and 1 pub. I'm very excited to get the pub. We've got a couple more hotels kind of on the way, so ever growing the Pig portfolio. Yeah, I've been in hospitality. I graduated in 1999. Seems like a very long time ago now, with my hotel catering degree, and I've kind of always been in personnel, as it was back in the day, through to people roles now for my career within hospitality. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Steve. And I should also mention as well, for all of you who have joined us today, keep an eye on your inbox. You will be receiving a lovely coffee and biscotti voucher for you to take from a brilliant coffee company from my home city of Bristol. So enjoy that. Do let us know how it goes. So look, you've mentioned there the Pig, and you know, I think everyone who's experienced it just knows what an incredible offering that it is. You've got incredible standards. I keep saying incredible, but you have fantastic standards. And I think it really sort of resonates from the team. Every single individual that works there seems to have this thread that's running through them. What do you think, Steve, have been those sort of key steps in building that people culture? And, you know, not dwelling on that sort of pandemic piece, but of course we lost an awful lot of experience during that time, but it doesn't seem to have diminished that service offering. And perhaps what let you understand that you were on the right track?
In some ways, we're kind of taking the business right back to Robin Hudson. It's a founder-led business. Still, Robin retires at the end of this year, but that won't mean his legacy is any less important. So it's a founder-led business, and so those kind of key tenets of people culture have always been around and are very much part of how Robin operates. And so as a result, it's kind of been how we have morphed into operating, if you like. The sale with KSL, whenever that was, a couple of years ago now, was a sort of a real, I suppose it was an opportunity to help to codify what it is that we do and how it is we do it and why it is we do it. And that was a great opportunity to gather around, a couple of hundred people around various kind of roadshows and workshops, just so that we can create the common language, because as you continue to grow, it's really easy to stray away from the path that got you to where it is you are. And that isn't to say that things, have to rigidly stay how they are as a business. Things need to morph and chop and change as businesses grow. And not wishing to dwell too much on the pandemic, but that pretty much showed everybody that. And so having that really clearly articulated is a really is such an important part of that growth phase. And those roadshows that we ran were just a great opportunity to make sure that, as we're talking about, I don't know, bring your character is one, for example, as a value within the business, that those were words that people could get behind and understood, and they weren't words that I'd come up with by any stretch of the imagination. They were words that tumbled out of many people's mouths over the course of loads of weeks. And then it's we talk in the business about finding your eights. So if your founder in this particular case is your number 10, the person who has essentially created the culture by just being as they are, then no one is ever going to be as culturally aligned as they are. So we have a theory that as long as you're never two steps away, culturally away from how the founder would have done it, then if you can find enough people with that sort of that 8 out of 10 of culture, then as you continue to grow, you'll hopefully stay in good shapes. That's the trick.
Yeah.
And how do you know it's working? I mean, we'll kind of go on to some of the KPI stuff, but quite a lot of it is just around feel. And I know that isn't necessarily what we're here to talk about, but some of it is around feel and the stories of when people completely nail it, and then people get it, and those things are really important to understand how something works that can be so intangible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting point. That sort of, as you grow, that culture dilution is such a risk, especially when you're embracing people to bring themselves and be themselves. So it's how do you make sure there's not a misstep there? You've made it sound very easy, and I know it certainly isn't. But can you give an example of where you've faced a real challenge with this along the way? Because I'm sure we've all had our experiences where mistakes have been made, or it's been more problematic than in other areas, or other challenges are slightly easier to overcome than others. I'd love to know where you've been able to recognize one of those challenges and how you've solved it.
I mean, some of the cultural misalignments, shall we say, kind of in the past, you're always, in a growing business, you're always going to get it wrong, and it is about trying to recognize that. And again, this isn't saying everyone has to fit into one particular box. That's not at all how it works. But if everyone's pulling in one direction and one or two people are pulling in another, you sort of need to understand why that is, and either redirect or in some cases, maybe they're not the right people for the business.
Right.
I mean, at the moment, and I don't have the solution for it, unfortunately, but the thing that is impacting all hospitality businesses, is the recruitment market at the moment, and that is a real difficulty with trying to balance off how culturally you would want to run your business and what you're prepared to sacrifice for the state of the operation, if you like. Very recently we opened up Pig in the Cotswolds, and out of my hotel openings so far, and we opened 2 when in COVID. It's been really, really, really difficult, and it's difficult to weigh off with the team that are there, that some of the things that we talk about and we think are really important in terms of work-life balance and well-being, and not being the old school hospitality businesses that demand. It's very difficult to sometimes balance off those things when you're really struggling in what is luckily a busy operation with needing more people in order to kind of fulfill it.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that, the Cotswolds, obviously it's a relatively shallow pond to fish from in terms of talent, and so to find those brilliant operators that also meet those sort of cultural requirements must be really tricky. So I can appreciate that's something that a lot of operators have faced. I was talking to an operator the other day where they were saying the average age of their management team had moved from, this isn't a you talk about the pandemic, it's very much not a pandemic webinar, but before the pandemic, I think it was sort of between 28 and 36, and post-pandemic, it's sort of 24 to 28. And that experience is sort of just gone. It's just moved on and moved into other sectors. So when you're then trying to find these skilled people that are able to deliver at the quality you want them to, but equally also deliver at that sort of cultural alignment area, I think that's got to be a challenge many operators face. So hopefully there's going to be a good solve for that coming soon from the sector.
And it's sometimes about weighing off the balance. We'll have a lot of people who are culturally kind of excellent. But to your point, and like I think our average age within our managers back in the day was about 33, and I don't think we'd be way off mid to late 20s now. So there has absolutely been a kind of a reduction in that. So it's weighing off, like, culturally exactly the right person to be there and leading the charge with your team and with your guests. But people just don't have the time yet in order to kind of get all of that experience, and so that's how we have to to make sure that we're continuing to support when maybe 5 years ago you would never have had to, per se, but you do now. So that's how it is.
Yeah, and you mentioned something earlier which was around the some of it is still feel, but and tech is obviously something that really helps in terms of those measurements of KPIs and tracking people's performance, etc. Have you found anything to date that really helps to sort of, in terms of that cultural piece and performance piece? Have you found a way to embrace technology to really get a good feel or a good measure of how things are doing?
Time will tell, but it's not about not looking at one particular thing, isn't it? It's sort of trying to look at the myriad of different bits of data that you can tap into, and some will tell you one thing which is the opposite of something else, and it can be quite difficult to narrow it down. We look at we look at a kind of a variety of things just to kind of give that sense check. From a team engagement perspective, we use Best Places in Hospitality as our sort of internal our internal and external benchmark. We at the moment, have hotels that we treat as individual hotels as part of the survey, rather than as the big hotel as a whole business. And so you kind of just get some nuances between each of the hotels, because they all operate similarly but differently all at the same time, and it's great to kind of share some of that best practice across them. So the team engagement score, if you like, that spits out of that is really important. That has to be measured against guest satisfaction, and you would hope that those two things would similarly marry up together in some way. An engaged team generally makes for happier guests.
Yeah.
And because of growth, and because we, from a retention perspective, try to keep things as interesting as we can, to keep people interested, we look at things like our internal promotion rates, and as we continue to grow, how many internal promotions do we have over the course of a particular 12-month period? How much external recruitment are we doing? How's that external recruitment measuring out at particular goals? And the particular external people coming in on a management level, are they staying? Are they going? Are we doing a good enough job with settling them in? And we also are now, with the way the world is, very focused on things like contracted hours, and seeing how many of those we are recontracted into the business when those hours are going when people leave, just to try to marry up what it to kind of marry up in the future how many people, how many hours would it take to run that particular apartment at that particular time of the year, which then helps our recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few bits there that you've. Oh, is that me that's echoing around? Sorry about that. There's a few pieces there. We talk a lot internally about helping our customers gain the competitive advantage. So how do you attract and retain the best talent? You mentioned there around that sort of internal promotion. So it sounds like, is that like a driver for you, a high component for you, is that you want to promote from within rather than bring in that sort of external skill?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's over time, I guess, finding the balance as a growing business. Over time, you're, unless you have a budget set aside to know that that group of people that you can externally bring in, and culturally and culturally make sure they're right, as you can kind of continue to grow as an internal promotion. But generally speaking, as you grow, you're going to need more external people coming in, and it's just making sure the business is called Homegrown Hotels, and homegrown in every way. You join as an apprentice and you can be a hotel director or a head chef. So the ethos is very much there as our within our mission. So it's an important track to keep hold of, just to make sure that we are keeping true to that.
Yeah, I know, that's a really good point. And sort of going back to what we talked about earlier around that sort of culture dilution. As you mentioned, some of these values and behaviours, etc., that you live by. How, when you're scaling a business, is there any sort of top tip or anything that you've seen work particularly well to stop them, to keep them being very true and stop them being just those aspirational words on the wall? Because as you say, that sort of homegrown piece, you have to remain true to that. I'd love to sort of get your take on it.
Yes, you do have to, once you've, I guess, nailed your flag to the mast, you do have to stick true to it. Some of it, I've seen a question that's just come out about from Patrick, about how do you measure return on investment on ROI culture-related initiatives?
Great question.
And sometimes you just can't. It's a great question, and it would be great to say that if you did that, it would equate to that. but quite a lot of the time they're just not as linear. I mean, you could say that if you internally promoted an assistant restaurant manager to a restaurant manager, you've maybe saved £6,000 in agency fees, but you will have invested, God knows how many tens of thousands of pounds in the investment to get that person there. So it's really, sometimes it's just not at all linear, but it's the way that works best for your it's the thing that works best for your business. And I don't think that probably answers your question, Paul. Sorry, I've completely gone off on one there.
No, it's good. No, I think it's good. I think what is interesting here, and I don't think we can have a webinar nowadays, even when we're looking at sort of people culture, without using the phrase AI, because I think it is obviously becoming omnipresent. I think every tech company under the sun has got it somewhere on their website. I saw a AI-powered washing machine the other day. I'm not quite sure how that was going to help me out. But the one thing that you touched on there, which I think is really important, is around that sort of correlation and causation. So there's as time has progressed, there's been more and more data made available to managers. And I think we do have to sort of have that kind of anchor point back to, why do people get into hospitality in the first place? And it's not to log into a workforce management solution or a stock management solution. It's dare I say, a necessary evil. It's something that helps them run their business. They need to do it. But, they're not always digitally native. If you've got someone who is great at customer experience, it doesn't mean that they're going to be someone that is hugely proficient at technology. So what we look at in terms of that AI piece and around that sort of that HR element, or the people side of things, is how can we actually utilize AI, or how can AI be utilized to eke out some of those correlations? So actually, if revenues are less and turnover is higher, or absenteeism is higher, this is where I think AI as a component or as a part of a solution can help steer people teams or even general managers and ops managers into giving them some signals. And I'd love to sort of get your take on, as a business, how do you consider, or do you consider AI as an important topic, and have you started embracing it at all to date?
To your kind of example, it's probably in stuff that we use that we don't even realize that it's in. I mean, if you've got artificial intelligence in a washing machine, then you're sure that it's helping you steer your business already. I mean, yes, we have tools that will have AI helping to prop them up, that will help in terms of predicting room revenue or room rates, for example. So you've got tools out there that are already advanced and providing analytical data to help make decisions about what it is you could, should, or shouldn't do. So that sort of stuff is already there. So I guess as a team, it's there to be embraced and in some ways actively embraced. But I think it's getting your head around about that it's not another thing to focus on. It's this ethereal thing that's happening in the background to help you focus on the things you need to focus on, and helping to inform you where to steer the ship, rather than either steering it for you, which is frightening, but also being this other thing that you have to go and look at in order to work out what it is you should or shouldn't do in the background, and using all of the analytics that are available to kind of, I guess, to flag that on an individual basis, that though that person or that team are less engaged than a team in another department within your hotel or your business or whatever it is, and the offset of that is that it's probably more likely that they're going to leave. That's going to increase your labor turnover. That's going to increase your recruitment costs. That's going to put your cultural alignment at more of a risk. And so therefore it is about flagging that to say, actually, either head of department or HR person or people person or whoever it may well be, that's an area that you need to go and focus on in order to help reduce the risk of that team turning over, and therefore assist with the operational efficiency of the business. And so I think, yes, it's there. We are embracing it to a certain extent, but there's so much more, I think, that's going to come out of this that will hopefully be really useful. And then it's a case of us as people, professionals, taking that information and then doing something with it, which is where the part of this absolutely comes in still.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. And one thing that actually you were talking about there about this that made me think about that sort of each of your different sites is slightly different, and obviously that bring yourself. So how the employee balance scorecard that has been talked about for many years. How easy is it for you as an operation to sort of understand or to be able to measure sites against each other when they are, to a degree, a unique offering, even though they are under that same umbrella? Does that become more problematic, or have you found a way of kind of threading that needle so that you've got some kind of equilibrium there?
I mean, there are certainly KPIs that we have that run across from a people perspective, and clearly from an operational perspective, running through all hotels. But you'll also know, because of geography and location, and that they have their each location has its own inherent set of problems that are quite bespoke to it, and so you can't measure apples with apples, and so you always end up even with a kind of a linear. If you looked at labor turnover, really crude measure, but let's say if you looked at labor turnover, you would know why one hotel was much higher than the other, because there's an element of seasonality to it. Could you then pit seasonal hotels against each other? Yes, you could do. And you could break it sort of down, but it's then difficult just to have one metric that is across everybody, just because of the individual nature of the sites. And I know that we're not alone in that within hotels. So it is difficult, but so I think that's where it comes into having more KPIs to help create the overall picture, rather than having kind of necessarily one particular KPI that's the live or die KPI that we'll look at from business to business, from an operational perspective anyway.
Yeah, okay, that makes lots of sense. Laura in the chat has asked a very interesting question because of
I've just seen it.
So for those that haven't read it, but how do you handle the need to have different approaches to drive a high performance culture when it comes to hotel based colleagues versus office based enabling functions? Because obviously for many businesses that I've worked with through the years, there's an awful lot of people that work at head office, for want of a better word, or that sort of central ops team that have worked through the organization. They have walked the walk and been a waiter and been a chef, etc., whatever it might be, and then they're in payroll, they're in finance, or whatever those roles are. Sometimes you are bringing people into that sort of central office that perhaps don't come from that hospitality background. And
Sure.
I know when I first started working within hospitality, it was I want to say the right phrase, but it was a rude awakening. It was such a different culture to what I was used to, because I come from a telecoms learning and development route. So it was very, very different. So how do you perhaps combat that or approach that so that it doesn't feel too disconnected?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're right, Laura. It's not a one size fits all, and it is, and sometimes can be a really tricky balancing act, because particularly as businesses grow, you may have I hate using the term head office, but you have a head office function that has grown up with the business, and particularly if you're internally promoting quite a lot, and so there's a lot of cultural stuff that people just kind of get, and that's just how life is. And then when you start to bring in, to Paul's point, external people into the business that have worked for multiple different businesses, or even, completely outside of an industry, because they've got their own unique set of skills, it isn't a one size fits all. How we have attempted to navigate it, and I'm certainly not sitting here saying that it's nailed by any stretch of the imagination, is that you have to have the core values of a business that run through everywhere, because they do. And sometimes from a head office function, that's very difficult to get your head around. How do you deliver, in our case, the extra 5% to our hotel businesses, which is one of our values? How do you provide a spirit of generosity with your head's department? Isn't as intuitive as it would be with a guest, for example. So you just have to work harder at those things, but that is the nature of the business that you're creating. And how we have tried to do that is accepting the fact that what people in one function need is going to be different to another one. So trying to align them together doesn't work. And as a result, try to tailor some things for a particular group of people who have very different needs in one part of an organization to another. And that would that also then works in different departments within hotels, for example. You end up having to put particular things in for particular groups of people, because there is an element of individuality that happens in any business or any department, or within any culture. So you just have to accept those individual changes and things that need to be done in order to make sure that particular team are performing as brilliantly as they possibly can, rather than, as you quite rightly say, Laura, one size fits all doesn't work. So there is no, in my particular view, I don't think there's a problem with having to pull together individual elements and strands for particular groups of people, because that by default they do a different job. How it is you go about doing that needs to be done in exactly the same way, which is where the values of a business run all the way through, regardless.
Yeah, and I know lots of operators do these sort of back to the floor type of work streams where they, to ensure that there isn't that disconnect. Is that something that you do? I know you are particularly hands-on with the recent openings, but you can sometimes get that feel of the people on the shop floor, the customer facing in the restaurants, or looking after the rooms, etc., who are being pushed or driven or coached, or whatever phrase that might be, could sometimes get that resentment of, oh, well, it's okay for you, you're kind of doing the 9 to 5, I'm here having to deliver this all the time. So do you do those sort of initiatives where it's actually, well, we're going to make sure we're all connected, or other types of initiatives?
Yeah, it's not quite as organized as that. I mean, it's something that, to be fair, I have been not great at in the last, I would say, most of this year, in terms of being out and about in hotels as much as I would have liked. But I think we have an operation, a very operational focused business. So we have, that sort of part of the team are in hotels the majority of their time. Right. So it doesn't have to be sort of organized under a particular banner. And it's just massively it's just massively encouraged. So if you have an idea and you want to kick that idea around with an operator, then yes, you can pick up the phone. Yes, you could do a Teams with them. But actually, if you really want to get into the guts of it all, then head down and have a cup of coffee for 20 minutes and you'll probably get more out of it. And it's that kind of approach that's sort of much more encouraged.
It's nice.
Which helps.
Definitely.
I was speaking to I was at an event a few weeks ago now, and their people director was telling me that they've got rid of their head office. So sort of post COVID, it's completely disappeared, and so that forces this group of people to be fully present on
site.
On site. And I can imagine there's probably a bit of good and bad that comes with that, but I could, I really smiled because some of my fondest memories of doing this, of doing this sort of an HR people-based job within businesses is when you're sitting in a restaurant in a corner and just taking it all in and just just getting the feel for it and seeing that the things that you talk about or the things that you're really trying really hard to replicate actually work, or at least you can sort of see it, and there's a real value in that for sure.
Yeah, you certainly. I think any of those blockers would quickly be highlighted. I think there was a couple of questions that came in. Jessica, I hope that what we were talking about there with the sort of, I guess, the office piece versus that remote or hybrid and the impact on people culture. Marcus was asking about data analytics to predict and improve employee turnover, and I think this for me is something I talk about quite often internally. It's all well and good presenting fantastic dashboards, but what that sort of going back to that correlation piece of actually, if your revenues aren't right and therefore your customer reviews are poor, your absenteeism is up, your employee net promoter score is down, etc., etc. There's a whole kind of multitude of different criteria that feed into that, which I think then you can start to pick away at what's the root cause, where's this truly coming from. And I think that's, like, I guess, not wanting to get too far into the sort of the revenue conversation, but there's always a place because it's hospitality.
Sure.
So we'd just love to sort of understand, because getting those aces in places, right people, right time, etc., and ensuring that you've got that great balance of people and that great skill set to, as you were saying, if you've got a happy team, you're going to get a better customer experience. I'd love to sort of understand where your mind is with the correlation, because I think when we talked about this before, you were saying your people team are probably talking more around that labour productivity and revenue forecasting more now than ever before. So I'd love to get your take on it.
Yeah, I was reading something probably 12, 18 months ago about HR and people teams needing to get much more heavily involved into labour productivity, and obviously we are now partnering with Sona, and so overnight you end up talking about labour scheduling and productivity. So that's a great predictor. It is, it won't have escaped any hospitality business in terms of margin squeeze and how difficult it is now to make your pound that you take deliver anywhere near the profit that it used to in the past. And obviously that puts considerable pressures on any business. And so therefore it's how more efficient can you be to deliver the extra penny here and there from the pound that you take to the bottom line. And the largest cost in the vast majority of business is going to be your people, and therefore the efficiency of that is of growing importance. but at the same time, we've been having these conversations. I've been doing, the training with our heads of department. In the future, this will be a tool that will happily write your rota for you. It will find the most efficient way for you to essentially run your department. So the thing that you currently take hours over and painstakingly ensure will get done for you in the background. And everyone's, your eyebrows prick up and think, oh, it's amazing, it'll solve all of my problems overnight, which clearly it won't do. Because yes, you will have a great schedule to the revenue that you're predicting that it is you're taking, but throughout all of this, what you still have is individuality, which is why people work for your business. And your job will end up being try to marry what is the A-star version of how to write a schedule versus how that impacts upon so-and-so and their school run, or the fact that actually your business doesn't do split shifts and isn't ever going to, in order to create operational efficiency, because it's just not good for your people and your well-being and your retention. And so you will get this sort of this kind of A-star version, and it will be around how do you go about screwing that up so that you maintain the right balance for the people within your team, so that they stay with you and still love working in the business that they currently love working in. And that to me, I think, is going to be our big challenge in the future. Is to how do you make A-star stuff work in a industry that's notoriously slightly messy about how we do stuff, for all of the right reasons, mostly, to be fair.
I think that's really fair, and I think this is that sort of that piece around again, going back to that previous message of, you're not necessarily the most tech proficient person. Just because you're a GM doesn't mean that you're used to using systems all the time.
Sure.
But if it can reduce some of that friction, if it can give them a better starting point, and actually then it gives them that capability of what was taking perhaps 10 hours, 15 hours to build a rota, or 5 hours, whatever it might be, depending on the complexity. But actually I can now go and put that time to better use, either serving a customer or going and having that sort of chat with the employee to check that they're okay, or perhaps right, I've been given this insight, now let's go and act upon it. As we're sort of coming towards the end of our time here, obviously we've got Christmas coming up. Unbelievably soon, really, isn't it? I'm reminded on a daily basis by my daughters. How are you preparing for that? Are you there's lots of sort of different noise in the sector around, is this going to be the sort of the bounce back? Is it going to be a quieter one? Some businesses are suggesting that bookings are coming in a little bit more short notice than previous. Are you seeing a return to norm? Are you sort of feeling it's going to be an interesting one? Christmas trees appeared in the chat, but
I like that. That is that's incredibly difficult to answer, only because I think at the same time all of us are waiting to hear what happens next week and the budget and whatever particular fallout comes out of that. I mean, what's always, he says, touching loads of wood, what is generally the case rather than always the case is that it's such an important time for people, whether you're, even if it's from a spending time with friends and family, as the occasion, that people do generally want to go out and want to spend, and yes, it's absolutely about getting set up to do that in the best possible way. Generally, you're seeing things a little bit more last minute than they ever sort of have been in the past, rather than the we'll plan ahead. And I said, I think the budget is possibly putting a little bit of a watch out in people's minds at the moment about that. I don't think it's the full bounce back that we're hoping in the economy, but we will take whatever wins within the industry as we can at the moment, and do all of our usual work around solutions for everything post the budget next week.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a dinner a couple of weeks ago, and there is obviously times of doom and gloom and scaremongering, etc. But someone said it very nicely, where they just said, "Look, the hospitality has gone through it all, and it always survives. It finds a way." And I think it's true. Like whatever seems to be thrown at it, as big a challenge as it might be, when you've got that strong culture, when you've got the great employees, when you've got a great brand offering, those resilient businesses will find a way, and they'll it might be painful, but they come out the other side dusting themselves off and ready for the next chapter. I would like to just check to see if there's any final questions or any final thoughts you might have, Steve, in terms of if there's like I always say this, so whenever we have new starters, I always have this thing with them, is that when we hire someone, we bring them in because there is a value that they have, or is there a skill set that they have that's going to help us as a business grow. Yeah. And we want that person to hold on to that and be true to it, and that helps our culture grow. Are there any kind of, it sounds really twee, but it's always been something that I've thought that you don't hire people in just to fall into the stream. You hire people in to help you find a sort of maybe a different direction. Are there any sort of golden wisdom nuggets? I've really thrown you on the spot here because you didn't know I was going to ask you this, that you like to think about or you talk to your teams about?
I think one is one that I always look at, and the other as a team we talk about quite a lot as a people team. And again, this is more us. It depends entirely upon your business. One of our values is collaborative and considered. Okay. And without boring everybody with the massive detail, you get very little done on your own in complex businesses, and you get a lot more done when you collaborate with everybody else around you. And as a business, everything is very considered. So if anybody has been to a Pig hotel, where the vase has been agonized over. The type of furniture, the color of the curtains, the colors of the walls has been agonized over. And so everything is very considered. And so I always find people who tick both of those boxes. I think that's, personally, I find that really, really important to have people that are collaborative and considered. And as a team, we talk nonstop about bring your character. And to your exact point, you go out and you can look for a particular skill set for a role that you're doing it, and that's what it is you do. How it is you go about doing it will be entirely the either way that it works or it doesn't work. And so how you bring yourself to work and who it is you are is incredibly important. And so bring your character is something that we talk about a lot as one of those in really important things at interview, that you feel someone can just be themselves at work, and that's important for that person in their long-term career, but also with the time that they're going to be with your business, that they feel they can be themselves at work is really important.
Yeah, and you've got to allow them to run with it as well, haven't you? I mean, I think that's when we caught up recently, you were talking about your sommelier, and you can always tell if you're going into one of the sites what sommelier, because of the wines they would have chosen, etc. And it's always going to deliver that same feel for that particular site, that particular location, which I think is
but in their own individual way, which is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, thank you so much for your time today. I will just check to see if any other questions have come into the chat. I don't think there are. I hope we've covered you all off. I did see that someone asked very early doors, when do we get our coffee and biscotti? It will be with you very, very soon. You'll receive it in your inbox today, and that's come from our partners at Hug. So do please enjoy that. Christina will be sending, as she said, a recording of the call or the webinar today through to and here she is, as I say it, to everyone that registered. Christina, any final questions from you before we say goodbye to everyone?
I think that is all. I see somebody is still typing. Maybe James has a question, but if anything about the biscotti and coffees, they will be coming right away. And we'll be also announcing soon our November webinar with some really exciting guests, and hope to see as many of you as possible joining us for that as well. Thank you so much. We had someone joining us from Hastings Hotels. On behalf of James. Right. So that's amazing. We love the community that we build in these chats, and it's always an opportunity to talk to each other, ask our speakers any questions we might have. And again, all our gratitude to Steve for joining us today, to Paul for making time, and see you all in the follow-up email. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
No, bye-bye. Great. Thanks. Bye.